Behind every locked door lies a story the world was never meant to hear. Welcome to Behind Bars TV, where we uncover the hidden realities of the world's toughest prisons, untold inmate experiences, and the systems built to contain them. From supermax facilities to forgotten penitentiaries, we reveal the truth behind concrete walls and razor wire. This is not fiction. This is the world behind bars. All death row executions in April 2025 U.S. There is a moment in the justice system that doesn't happen in a courtroom. Not in front of a jury. Not during arguments. Not during sentencing. It happens quietly, behind closed doors, on a date set months in advance, after years, sometimes decades, of appeals. April 2025. Multiple execution dates scheduled across the United States. Each case carrying a long legal history, years of investigation, families on both sides waiting for closure. This is not a story about the act itself. This is a story about the timeline that leads to it, the legal system behind it, and what those final weeks reveal about justice, accountability, and consequence. What death row really is. Death row is not a single place. It exists across multiple states, each with different facilities, different procedures, different timelines, but they share common elements: high-security housing, limited movement, structured routines, long-term confinement. Many inmates spend years, decades, waiting, not for release, but for the outcome of appeals. Because sentencing is not the final step. It's the beginning of a much longer legal process. How a date is set. Execution dates are not sudden. They are scheduled through a legal process. It involves court orders, state-level approval, final review of appeals. Once a date is set, it triggers a sequence. Legal teams prepare final filings. Appeals may be submitted. Courts review last-minute challenges. These final weeks are often the most active legally, because every remaining option is explored. The final appeals. Even after years of legal review, cases often continue until the final days. Legal teams may raise procedural concerns, new evidence claims, constitutional arguments. Courts must decide quickly, sometimes within hours, because the system allows for review, but not indefinite delay. Former legal experts describe this stage as the most compressed timeline in the entire justice process. The first case, a decade-long timeline. The first case scheduled in April 2025 did not begin recently. It began years earlier. A criminal investigation that led to arrest, trial, conviction, followed by a long appeals process. The timeline included initial investigation findings, witness testimony, court rulings across multiple levels. Over time, the case moved through state courts, appellate courts, federal review. Each stage examined evidence, procedure, legal standards. By the time the execution date was set, the case had already passed through years of scrutiny. What remained was not the question of guilt, but whether any legal grounds remained to delay or overturn the outcome. The final legal challenges. As the date approached, legal activity increased. Defense attorneys submitted final appeals, often focusing on procedural arguments, claims related to prior rulings, requests for stays of execution. Courts reviewed these filings under strict timelines. Sometimes, decisions came within days, or even hours. The process is designed to ensure all legal options are considered, but the system continues to move forward. In many cases, these final filings are the last opportunity for intervention. And when they are denied, the schedule proceeds. The final days on death row. The final days before an execution follow a structured process. Inmates remain under increased supervision, controlled movement, scheduled interactions. This period may include legal consultations, family contact, religious or personal reflection. Correctional staff follow established protocols. Every step is documented. Every movement accounted for. The environment becomes quieter, more controlled. Because at this stage, the system is no longer investigating. It is carrying out a decision that has already been legally reviewed. The second case, a different kind of investigation. Unlike the first case, this investigation was not straightforward. It involved multiple individuals, layers of evidence, and a longer timeline to reach conclusions. Investigators had to examine physical evidence, witness statements, behavioral patterns. Each element had to align, because in complex cases, consistency matters more than speed. The case developed gradually, piece by piece, until prosecutors were able to present a structured narrative in court. Public attention and legal debate. As the case moved through the legal system, it began to draw attention. Media coverage increased. Public discussions followed. Some focused on the details of the case, the legal process, the broader implications. Others raised questions about sentencing, appeals, the role of the justice system. This created a wider conversation beyond the courtroom. Because certain cases don't remain isolated. They become part of a national discussion. The final decision holds. As the scheduled date approached, legal teams submitted final challenges. Courts reviewed prior rulings, new claims, constitutional arguments. In the end, the decision remained unchanged. The courts determined the case had been fully reviewed. Legal standards had been met. No new grounds justified delay. At that point, the legal process reached its conclusion, and the case moved forward. The third case, a shorter path through the system. Not all death row cases follow decades-long timelines. Some move faster. The third case in April 2025 followed a more direct path. Investigation completed within a shorter period. Trial concluded without extended delays. Appeals progressed without major procedural interruptions. This does not mean the case was simple, but it meant fewer legal complications, fewer delays, and fewer challenges that required extended review. By the time the execution date was set, the legal process had already passed through required courts, met procedural standards, completed its review cycle. This case highlighted something important. Not all timelines are long, but all must meet the same legal threshold. Comparing the cases. By this point in April 2025, 3 cases had reached their final stage, each one different, each one unique. But when placed side by side, patterns appeared. All followed a structured legal process. All passed through multiple levels of review. All involved final appeals before the scheduled date. The differences were in timeline length, complexity of evidence, level of public attention. But the outcome came from the same system. A system designed to review thoroughly, allow challenges, and eventually reach a conclusion. What the final weeks reveal. The final weeks before scheduled executions reveal something often overlooked. The system is still active. Even at the end, legal teams continue working. Courts continue reviewing. Procedures continue being followed. This period is defined by urgency, precision, finality. Because once all legal options are reviewed, the process reaches its endpoint. And, at that point, the system is no longer asking questions. It is carrying out decisions already made. The case with last-minute developments. This case followed a familiar path. Until the final days. New filings were submitted close to the scheduled date. Legal teams raised arguments that required immediate review. Courts had to respond quickly. Because time was limited. These filings often include requests for stays, claims requiring urgent evaluation, appeals based on recent legal developments. The timeline becomes compressed. Decisions that once took weeks now take hours. Emergency court decisions. When last-minute filings are submitted, courts must act immediately. Judges review the legal basis of a claim, whether it meets required standards, whether it justifies delaying the process. These decisions are not taken lightly, but they must be made quickly, because the system is designed to allow review, but prevent indefinite delay. In many cases, rulings are issued within hours, and once a decision is made, it carries immediate effect. When time runs out, at a certain point, the process reaches a limit. All filings reviewed, all decisions made, all options considered, and time runs out. This moment is not dramatic. It is procedural, because by this stage, the system has already examined the case, reviewed the appeals, reached its conclusions. What remains is execution of the process, not the decision itself. Patterns across April 2025. By the end of April 2025, several cases had reached their final stage. Individually, each case was different, but together, patterns emerged. Across all cases, the legal process followed structured steps. Appeals extended timelines significantly. Final weeks were the most legally active. Investigators, legal analysts, and observers often look at clusters like this to understand broader trends. Because when multiple cases align within a short time frame, it reveals how the system functions under pressure. Different states, same structure. The United States does not have a single unified death penalty system. Each state operates independently, with different laws, different procedures, different facilities. But despite those differences, the structure remains similar. Trial, appeals, final review, scheduled date. This shared framework creates consistency across states. Even when details vary, legal experts often point out, the system may differ in form, but not in function. The system under pressure. When multiple cases reach final stages at the same time, the system experiences pressure. Courts handle multiple filings, tight deadlines, urgent decisions. Legal teams work simultaneously across different cases. Judges must review separate arguments, independent claims, individual timelines. Despite this, the system continues to operate because it is designed to handle complexity, volume, time-sensitive decisions. And April 2025 became an example of that. The aftermath, what happens next? When a case reaches its final stage, the legal process ends. But the impact does not. For the system, the case is recorded. The process is documented. The outcome becomes part of legal history. For legal teams, years of work come to a close. Files are finalized. Cases move from active to archived. For families on all sides, the timeline ends. But the emotional impact continues. And for the broader system, each case becomes a reference point, a precedent, a record, a reminder of how the process unfolded. What April 2025 reveals. April 2025 was not just a collection of cases. It was a snapshot of a system in motion. It showed how long legal processes can take, how structured the system is, how every case follows a defined path. It also revealed something deeper, that justice systems are not defined by single moments, but by processes, long, detailed, often complex. And at the end of those processes, decisions are carried out based on years of review. This documentary was not about a single outcome. It was about understanding how the system works, how decisions are reached, and what those final moments represent within the broader structure. Because behind every case is a timeline, and behind every timeline is a system designed to reach a conclusion. April 2025 will be remembered not for one case, but for what it revealed, a system that reviews, questions, decides, and ultimately acts, not quickly, but deliberately. And whether viewed through law, history, or human impact, it leaves one final question. What does justice mean when the process is complete? What you just saw is more than a story. It's a reality lived by thousands behind bars. If you believe in uncovering the truth, the kind hidden behind concrete walls and silence, then join us. Subscribe to Behind Bars TV and never miss a chapter in the world's most dangerous stories. Until next time, stay aware, stay informed, and remember, freedom and confinement are sometimes only a wall apart.